Well, our next guest has been closely monitoring the content coming out of Minneapolis. Christopher Schneider is a sociology professor at Brandon University. He's also the co-author of Police Body-Worn Cameras, Media and the New Discourse of Police Reform. Christopher is someone who studies user-generated content and police video footage. What's your reaction to what we've seen coming out of Minneapolis?
I think it's really interesting in terms of this particular case, the competing narratives, the competing official narratives by the federal government and state and city officials in Minnesota and Minneapolis. Typically, when we have law enforcement involved shootings, government officials usually fall in line with what police and law enforcement administrators are saying about the shooting. This particular circumstance, I think, is a dramatic departure from some of the other shootings that we've seen.
Okay, so let's go through that in two halves, and I think it applies to both shootings, but we can focus on the most recent one on the weekend, starting with what we heard from government officials, the head of ICE, for example, just, shortly after the shooting, some really strong and some might say over-the-top declarations about what they said happened. So take us through some of that.
I think, initially they came out and, as noted previously, contradicted what we saw in the video and also witness reports on the ground. And, this was inconsistent, again, with some of the online narratives that were sort of unfolding in relation to what it is that happened. And then we see the images themselves in the video start to be run through generative AI. Some of these things become consistent with some of the narratives. So, for example, there is an image that has been altered that has placed a gun erroneously into Alex's hand in place of the cell phone that he was holding. This has been circulating on right-wing platforms and social media. This particular image is consistent with the federal government and what they're saying has happened. And on the other side of the political spectrum, we have the image has been sharpened to show people what it is that we really saw. And the sharpening of that removed the gun from the ICE agent's hand and changed Alex's face, all of which, again, casts doubt in terms of the legitimacy of the materials that we're seeing.
Okay, so that's interesting, and I hadn't seen those fake versions of the video. That's troubling, obviously. Let's put those aside for a moment, because what a lot of people saw, millions of people saw, is the New York Times, CNN, CBC, lots of mainstream media organizations, and people can shout at their TVs if they want in some living rooms, but a lot of people turn to those sources of information, and we saw the actual videos being verified and then carefully being analyzed, and they clearly showed what people like the head of ICE had said was wrong. Was just absolutely wrong. And I couldn't help but think, if we didn't have that video, what would the public debate and discourse have been like? You must have thought about that.
I mean, indeed, this is very important in terms of transparency. And we go back to the police murder of George Floyd in the same city in 2020. Initially, the police whitewashed that and said that, a man had died as a result of a medical incident, an interaction with an officer. The video went online and we all saw what really happened. This is very important for transparency, which is typically the way in which body-worn cameras are presented to the public. However, in the United States, in different jurisdictions, police sometimes refuse to release body-worn camera footage in circumstances the public wants to see, especially in relation to officer-involved shootings. So, arguably, social media materials have done more for bringing transparency to some of these circumstances and then moving forward the public debate and getting the ball rolling in relation to the pursuit of justice, as we're currently seeing right now. The members and civilians of the state of Minnesota, they want to see these ICE officers charged. Whether or not that's going to happen remains to be seen, but there's definitely some public interest in that.
So what's the advice here, or what's the lesson, do you think, for people who are involved in public demonstrations and thinking about, or even they just see a police interaction? Because with the murder of George Floyd, that wasn't a protest, it was a police interaction. But what would you say to people who on the street see interactions with police that they're beginning to question? Should they pull out their phones and start to video?
I think absolutely. I think in the interest of transparency, we should all be doing that when safe to do so. And, if we were to take police administrators and government officials at their word that body-worn cameras are about promoting transparency, we should actually be encouraging members of the public to record law enforcement interactions with individuals, because what this does is provide, as we've seen in this case, multiple angles and indeed increased understanding about complex situations as they unfold. And we saw this very same thing in Canada in 2013 with the Toronto Police Service shooting of Sami Yatim. There were multiple angles that came out, and this helped give investigators more information, more evidence to best determine what it is that happened. I think recording these interactions is very important in relation to the pursuit of justice and due process.
You are an American who is teaching at a Canadian university, two very different countries, and within those countries, many different jurisdictions. But maybe we end with this. What's your message for police agencies? Because sometimes police officers in the field will see somebody taking video and tell them to stop.
I think, if officers are not doing anything wrong, if ICE agents are not doing anything wrong, they should have no problem with being recorded. Indeed, we live in a surveillance society. Most of us are surveilled at work on a regular basis, surveillance cameras. And if you're not doing anything wrong in relation to the police work or the law enforcement interaction, there should be no real reason. If you're impeding the police, that's another story. I think, as I noted, to reiterate my comment, when safe to do so, and at a distance to make sure that you're not impeding the law enforcement interaction, I think that we should encourage that in the interest of transparency.
Christopher Schneider, a sociology professor at Brandon University, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.